Hello, I'm Rob Shearman, and this is The Sirens of Audio.
Well, that was a fabulous... Let me start again.
Is that fabulous? Was it?
Fabulous.
Fabulous. That was fabulous.
I need a drink of water, folks.
Yeah.
That was a fabulous Okay, that was a great... Now I've completely gone blank. This is going to be awesome. G'day audiophiles, this is the Sirens of Audio, the show that explores the universe of Doctor Who in the audio medium. I'm Dwayne.
And I'm Philip. G'day, Dwayne. G'day, audiophiles.
How are you?
I am really good, thank you. I had a lovely time.
It's good. It's good to hear that you're really good. I'm good too. Thanks for asking.
Good.
We are going to be speaking with one of the legends of Big Finish, because the sound designers are the people who make all this absolutely possible. Iain Meadows has been working on exclusively, pretty much, on the Ninth Doctor stories since Christopher Eccleston came on board. So with the most recent box set recently coming out, it was a good opportunity to have a chat with him. So we're going to be doing that soon, Philip.
Indeed, it's going to be great.
But before we do, you know what's coming, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
It's a rabbit hole. Let's go. Righto, Philip, just a bit of a change of pace for this rabbit hole. I thought, because I was looking into Iain Meadows' background a little bit, and I discovered that he was in community radio, I wanted to just ask you, and I'll tell you one or two of my things anyway. What other interesting little hobbies or things have you got up to in your life that might be of interest to me and the listeners and viewers?
I'm not sure there'd be anything of interest.
Well, I'll start then. Well, the reason I came up with the idea is because I was been in community radio as well, and I was in community radio for 10 years. I was also on the board of directors for that too for a while, because it was incorporated, so you've got to have a board, and that was a very interesting experience, being a member of a board. It's a bit like being a member of a fan club association too. Lots of interesting things happen there too, which have you and I have both been part of the Doctor Who club.
We have. We just didn't overlap. You left just before I arrived. Right.
Well, there you go. But one other interesting fact that you may not know about me, Philip, and everyone's going to know this now, is that many years ago, I've started a few businesses here and there, but many years ago, I found myself out of work and I was unable to find work. And I had $20 left in my wallet. So I went to the supermarket and I bought the ingredients for 6 chocolate cakes. I baked the chocolate cakes. I put them in a basket, put on a white shirt, went out and I sold them. Made a good profit, so I went and bought some more ingredients. I kept doing that until I turned that into a business. So I had a home cake baking business, and I had that for a good couple of years in Sydney. Those were the days when you could go from business to business. There weren't anti-hawking laws then, and I could hawk my wares. And I really enjoyed that. I got a taste for self-employment and started up a few other businesses over the years. But the reason I'm thinking of that now is because I bake so many cakes, I had refused to do any baking for years and years. And yesterday I pulled out one of those old recipes. It's been maybe 25, 30 years, perhaps almost, since I've done that business. And I baked one of my original recipe cakes yesterday, and my family loved it. So it's given me a taste of baking again, get back into the kitchen. There you go. Bet you didn't expect to hear that on the Sirens of Audio.
You're a baker. Well, there you go.
What about you, Philip?
Well, I'm trying to think. I mean, So what's the question? What do we do on the side?
Yeah, something interesting. I mean, everyone knows we do this podcast. This is something we're interested in. It's an interesting hobby, but is there anything else besides that might be different, unusual, or just something that you like to do? For instance, I didn't know you're a saxophone player.
Oh, well, there you go. Yeah,
so there you are.
Play saxophone. Yeah, I mean, I've been in lots of bands. So I was the main band I was in for lots of years. Actually, after I left school, was called the Georges River Concert Band and Jazz Band, and that was a big thing until I got married.
Playing sax, or were you doing other?
Mainly saxophone. The concert band I was often doing a lot more percussion, timpani, things at the back, tuned percussion. But jazz band has always been saxophone as my main instrument. I mean, I also play piano. I mean, I've taught concert bands for years until recently. So all instruments. I've started up a couple of concert bands in primary schools that I taught at. I was a bit left wing. I was actually interesting thing I did was I was the secretary of the Teachers Trade Union, Teachers Federation for a number of years. So actively involved in Federation matters, which was a lot of fun in terms of a lot of good friendships that came out of that. I've done bizarre stuff actually, all sorts of bits and pieces.
Give me a bizarre thing.
Well, I think the trade union one's possibly bizarre. I mean, I'm just I don't want to get too political. People look at me and go, "Oh, well, we're not going to listen to him anymore," because depending on the outlet. I mean, one of the things I did, which I enjoyed, was I served on the New South Wales Board of Studies for a number of years, writing curriculums. So at one stage, it's gone now, the creative arts curriculum, so music, art, drama, dance. I was one of a few people involved in the whole writing of that syllabus, which was then taught to all of New South Wales students for a number of years before it was replaced by a newer model with a newer minister. So, right. So I've been involved in all sorts of little organisations and planning things, and I've done a lot of camp work. I've taken a lot of kids overseas on trips to help in poorer countries. So I've taken kids to China, Moldova, Russia, Armenia. So a lot of Eastern Bloc countries, and I spent many months with kids working. What's
the most memorable place that you've been to overseas on one of these trips?
Probably Armenia, which is a place that no one goes to anymore. But both the work we were doing, it's we were recreating a medical centre. So it was a very Armenia's an interesting place. There's a lot of money there. Well, usually in the world, lots of money, lots of poverty. And so you go to the centre of the city, and it's just spectacular and beautiful. And the whole main street, and there's these beautiful giant staircases and dancing fountains. They are dancing fountains. There's music that plays, and there's all choreographed fountains. It's spectacular. But you move one block either side of the main street, and you just hit poverty. But we were working in some of the outlying villages, and there was a medical centre that had basically fallen apart. And they'd managed to hire a new nurse to work there, but it was unfit for human consumption. And so I had about 12 kids there, and we cleaned the whole place out and painted it all out and reset it all up and made some furniture and, just got that place going again. So that was just a lovely experience. But just, being able to give to the community, give to some other areas and learning a lot about the people. But that's one of several trips I've done.
Excellent. And you sat there going, I don't know what I've done. You've done some fantastic things, Philip.
Oh, I know, but nervous about talking about trade unions with all our rich listeners are going, commie. Not the Teachers Federation is quite that. It's fairly left wing. Yeah, it's okay.
So that's enough of our get to know your podcast hosts segment for today, and our rabbit hole topic. So we might throw in a trailer for. Let's see. Shall we throw in a trailer for the Ninth Boctor? The Ninth
Boctor? Yeah,
that is getting cut.
The Ninth Boctor.
I can't remember. It's Into the Stars.
Into the Stars.
So let's throw in a trailer for the latest Ninth Doctor box set, Into the Stars, and we'll be back in a moment with the sound designer for that set and many others, Iain Meadows.
From Big Finish Productions, Doctor Who, The Ninth Doctor adventures into the stars.
What have you seen from up there? Oh no. Oh no!
Halt! Halt immediately!
Applying deadly force! Applying deadly force! Sontaran army presence detected!
I've died a few times. It's always different.
We have captured a time traveler and his TARDIS.
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 Well, that's no way to treat a customer. I thought I was supposed to be always right.
My friend Xana went hiking in the Cellarage once. Do you know Xana?
I don't.
Everybody knows Xana. Married to Pod. They've got 3 planet hoppers and a holiday home in Helicon Prime.
I'm new here.
Well, anyway, the point is, you know pleasure ports. Things happen here that you couldn't get away with anywhere else.
What is this, Stilo? They're both activists. I've seen them before. Get rid of them. They think they can win the swine.
It's out.
It's not happy.
Last of its kind out there in the universe. Would you be happy?
Who are you?
Another doctor. Nobody interesting, but you are fascinating.
Dr. Bella,
I'm sorry.
Are they?
Dead. Yeah.
they've been frozen.
I only suspected before. The TARDIS felt a fold in reality that gave me such a chill. But now I know for sure. On Rebos, you're called the Bitter King. On Cacophony, the Cold Bringer. You go by many names, but since we're nearest to Earth, I ought to call you Jack Frost. I'm here to save them.
Doctor, that's nonsensical. It's obscene. Why would anyone want to save the Sontarans?
The unsung hero of every audio adventure is often the sound designer. If they do a bad job, you notice, but when they're doing a good job, you hardly ever do. Today, we've got one of Big Finish's finest with us, Iain Meadows. Iain, thank you for joining us.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, listen, we've been enjoying your stuff and talking about a lot of your recent material, particularly with the Ninth Doctor. But before we get into some of that sound design stuff, do you want to tell us a bit of background in terms of, well, where are you? And tell us a little bit about yourself.
Where am I in the world?
Where are you in the world?
Yeah, I'm sat in the Highlands of Scotland, the northwest Highlands of Scotland. So if I look out my window, I can see Gairloch, and then I can see the Atlantic Ocean and the Isle of Skye nestled just about 20 miles away. I think you might be able to get a ferry, but most of us now take the road bridge if we want to go to Skye, which is about 3 hours drive. And if you want to get any shopping, that's about an hour away, the closest big store. So we're fairly remote, but it's absolutely gorgeous up here. And we are, of course, in Westeros.
So why are you living in such a remote part of the world?
To get away from people. No, that's not true. I love people. No, it was I've been in radio for about 30 odd years. Radio presenting, running radio stations, and radio's changed an awful lot. And I wanted to get back to doing something which is a bit more, I suppose, a bit more creative and a bit more for the community. So there was a job that came up, and I went for it. Didn't think I'd get it, and then I did. And then I had to tell my city-loving US wife that we were going to potentially move if she said yes to the Highlands. And so that's what brought us here. But she's loving it so far. So it's a big adventure.
So how long have you been there for?
We've been here about a year. So I came up in October of last year. She joined me in November while we were sorting out things back down south. But I mean, it's a different way of life as well. It's a bit more laid back, and I've not had to put on formal clothes for about a year, which is lovely. I can just slob around in a t-shirt and jeans, and it's great. And no one really bats an eyelid, because in my semi-corporate existence before, there was always the need to put on something smart. I mean, not that I'm adverse to dressing smartly. It's just that it's a bit more relaxed. And I think, the pandemic changed everything as well. And I think you take stock of how you want to live, really. And it's we got a beach just outside as well that we can go walking on, and there's no crowds, which is fantastic.
So what was the job? What was the job that led you there?
It's a station manager's job. So I'm when I'm not sound designing, I'm in charge of the radio station, and they also wanted to sort of, the old station manager was retiring, and they wanted to perhaps bring it a little more into the 21st century. So that's what I'm here to do. So
I did notice that you were in community radio, which took my interest straight away, because I was in community radio here in Tasmania for about 10 years. And often in Australia, depending on where you go, the community radio station can be pretty interesting, some of the characters that you get on there.
Yeah.
The station I was on in Hobart was a little bit larger than some of these country ones. How is it different to, you said you're in commercial radio too. How is community radio different for you, and how much you said it changed a lot too over the last 30 years?
Yeah, commercial radio, as opposed to community radio, is different. Commercial radio, they will test everything. Every song that they play, it's going to be a hit that people instantly know, which is a strength and a weakness, because of course people do know it, but then their playlists are quite small. Back in the day, I think it was a bit more adventurous. It's a lot more risk adverse these days, and you can understand why, because there's huge amounts of money at stake. And the way it's changed in this country, it's become much more focused on group output rather than local output. So they're sort of quasi-national radio stations, and they've got big personalities on there that people will remember from when they were growing up listening to things like Radio 1 over here and Radio 2. But in terms of actual locality, and in terms of actually, I suppose, focusing on community issues, or if there's a big talking point in the community, they tend not to touch it. And again, it's perfectly understandable, because they're chasing big bucks, big national brands who advertise on there. So that's the way it's sort of changed. Whereas here with the community radio station, we can still talk about local issues. You're right in the sense that there are characters. I mean, there are certain people around the village who have no filter at all. It's gone completely. So if it's in there, it's coming out here, and you try not to take offense, but when you are first up here, it can take you a little unawares, let's put it like that. So there's that, and I think that coming from I suppose a professional background, I do sometimes think, well, it's not the way that we would have done it in commercial radio, but there again, I suppose to a degree, that's the point. The whole point is as well that people, when they're turning on the radio, will know the people that they're listening to. So there's a little bit of give and take there, I think.
One thing that I really enjoyed as a presenter was the fact that I had total free reign as to what I played. So if I found or discovered a specific band that didn't get any airplay on the national broadcast or any other commercial station, I could really push them, and the listenership was quite high in the area. And we were starting to do lots of streaming at the time as well. So people all over the world could hear this stuff, and people were accessing this music for the first time. So do you think that's changed much since now we're in the age of Spotify and other streaming services? Is that any different, or is this still a place where you can access that sort of underground content?
I think there's still a place for it, and I think that what radio is very good at, be it on a national level or be it on a local level, is that you can curate your playlist and you can present to people those exciting little gems and those finds. That's not so prevalent when it comes to the big national networks, because they tend to sort of focus on the stuff that everybody knows. But if you're looking to break an artist, over here, I think the BBC still do that relatively well. But that's the thing about local radio, that, for example, we've got some very good Scottish bands, Tidelines being one of them, who are coming to Gairloch to play in the community hall, which is a tiny little venue for a band like them, but they're touring around Scotland. And I didn't know anything about Tidelines or Nightworks, for example. They blend electronic music with traditional Gaelic, and it's quite an interesting combination. So local radio or ultra local radio is very good for presenting little gems like that to people. I think there should also be a mix of the familiar, because the way I put it, there are three types of music. There's the music hits, everybody knows them. There's hits and songs that you forgot you knew, and then there's the stuff that you introduce people to. And I think if you've got a combination of that, I think everybody's kind of happy. I'm less satisfied when it seems like in community radio people love a novelty song, and so I'm less happy when I hear things like the Wombles coming on the radio, and songs like Wombling Free or Black Lace's Agadoo. There are certain songs I think that really should be put back into the cupboard and forgotten, or possibly even the record's just melted. But you take the rough with the smooth, don't you? I think.
So you've done lots of years of radio. What else? What led you to sound design? Were they concurrent?
For a while they were. I think what happened was that, again, I think this is about 2010. I think I've been listening to Big Finish for a long time, and thought, it's amazing the work that they do, and it was absolutely brilliant. And I thought, well, I've been presenting for a long time, and I'm getting a bit fed up of presenting. You go through little phases, I think, and so I thought, well, I wonder if there's anything else I can do. And I'd done radio production, which is not too dissimilar to sound design. And so I thought, well, I wonder if there's a way of getting involved in doing sound design with Big Finish. And I think the first there was an audiobook, a BBC audiobook that James Goss wrote called Dead Air. And so I used that as an experimental piece, because it's David in character as the 10th Doctor on a found recording. But of course they've pitched it so that it sounds like it's an old damaged recording on reel to reel. So I took that back into the studio. I corrected the pitch variants. I got a couple of actor friends of mine I transcribed the entire adventure, which took ages, but I got them to read the parts in, and then I just started putting all the effects in and other bits and pieces. Sent that off to it was the lovely Paul Spragg at the time, who said that he would try and put that in front of Nick. And Paul was such a gentleman, actually. He never failed to answer a question or come back to me, and he's obviously much missed, but he told me that Nick was quite busy, and so I didn't really think anything would come of it. But for me, it was a kind of step in the right direction. I then actually started my own audio adventure, because when a friend of mine called Matt Hopper and myself were really kind of getting a little bit dissatisfied with radio and the way that things were sort of going, we thought, well, why don't we do a bit of audio drama? So we did. We made a reboot of the Robin Hood Legend. That did quite well for us. We won some awards off the back of that. It got itself onto Radio 4 Extra. And off the back of that, that's what I met Nick at the BBC Audio Awards, because in a couple of categories we were up against him, or up against Big Finish. I think we lost the first year, and then we won the second year. Then off the back of the win, Nick and I started having conversations about sound design and Foley, and that's kind of how it started. I mean, by then I was still doing radio, but I was becoming more interested in the sound design. So yeah, concurrent.
Now you're saying that you were keen to work for Big Finish because you listened to the production, so you've got a history of loving Doctor Who. What's your Doctor Who?
Huge.
Tell us about your Doctor Who love and how that developed and when it developed. And
well, I think as so many people remember, cowering behind the sofa. I do remember the moment. It was at my grandmother's house, and I was cowering behind the sofa, and a Dalek was gliding in, and it was Planet of the Daleks. And I remember my mum saying, well, don't watch it. And I was like, no, I want to watch it. But, it's that terror, but you're still glued to the TV screen. And it was John Pertwee. I remember being absolutely devastated when John Pertwee regenerated into Tom Baker. Fool, because Tom Baker then came in and then really became my doctor, because he was with me all through my childhood. And I would religiously sit there on a Saturday night. And, if we were out on a Saturday afternoon and my mum was taking too long, in my opinion, to get things done, I would just do that pestering thing that children do to get home so that we could watch Doctor Who. Because in those days, of course, there was no on demand, there was no video, there was no nothing. So you must see it, and if you missed an episode, it was like life and death, really, wasn't it? I mean, it was terrible if you missed an episode. So yeah, I was kind of fanatical about Doctor Who. We didn't have a lot of money growing up, so we couldn't have any of the toys or anything like that. But if I could get a reading of some of the Doctor Who's, I think there was State of Decay that Tom Baker did once. I loved that. I had that. Subsequently, many years later, I found the Genesis of the Daleks LP, which I've still got on LP, which is locked away in a safe, so it's very safe. There were all these little odds and ends that you could pick up along the way, Doctor and the Pescatons, and it was just glorious, because it was that little slice of being able to get away from it all, and in the company of what I loved about Tom's Doctor is you felt so safe with him, because he wasn't necessarily letting on that he was scared, and then it was all right. So that's my kind of history with Doctor Who growing up. And then I remember over here they did slip back on a thing called Pirate Radio 4 when Doctor Who was off air. And even then I was thinking, well, it's a no-brainer to me. I suppose I always had that interest in radio and sound, because being a sad, geeky kid, if I could have the choice of a sound effects record or something from the charts, I'd go for the sound effects, which might be a bit odd, really, thinking about it. But I'd sit there listening to the Doctor Who sound effects and think, oh, this is great. So it seemed like a no-brainer to me that Radio 4 should really be doing Doctor Who on the radio, because actually the sets were so much better, and Colin and Nicola were still absolutely awesome. So yeah, it's always been there. I mean, now this is how sad I am. When I was making money from radio, I was able to buy 2 Daleks full size, which are in the garage, and a TARDIS, which I used as a voiceover booth for a while. So it had a practical purpose. Always put it on your expenses, So it's always been there. And now I've got quite a bit of Doctor Who merchandise. I drive my wife crazy, I'm sure, by saying, oh, maybe I need another TARDIS. And she's like, no, you don't need another TARDIS. You've got 3 or 4 already. Why would you need another TARDIS? But,
Is that all you've got?
Yeah, 3 or 4. That's all.
You need more than that. I've got the full set behind me.
Yeah, I know. I've been admiring your array of Daleks behind you, which is just lovely. I've got 3 behind me. You can't see them, but I've got 3 or 4 Daleks behind me. But
I picked up another 2 today, so I'm trying to get the complete set of them as well.
Were they full size though, like Ian?
No, I don't have full size, darling. That would lead to divorce. It really would.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. I think you have to choose your battles, don't you? And I mean, I've got a huge DVD collection, and if ever there is the opportunity to sit down and watch a Doctor Who, I'm there. So but I have introduced.
You mentioned Slipback, but were you aware of the audio visuals at the time?
No, I wasn't. I came to that quite late. It was. I can tell you where I found the Big Finish CDs. I wasn't aware of Big Finish, and because weirdly, for a Doctor Who fan, I didn't really buy Doctor Who magazine, and I kind of stayed on the periphery of it, and I think I was quite happy. I mean, I knew I was a fan.
But you weren't in fandom particularly. You didn't.
No, I don't. No, I wasn't in fandom. I was a fan, but to be honest with you, I think I was quite I suppose I was focused on my career in radio because it was going quite well. And although I knew what I liked, I wasn't kind of involved in fandom. That came a little later. But I was with one of my oldest and dearest friends. We decided that we would do a bit of a lads drinking tour of Ireland. And we were in Dublin, and I went into Forbidden Planet there. And there in a locked cabinet were the first two Big Finish adventures. No, actually it was the second and third, wasn't it? Because it was Phantasmagoria and Whispers of Terror. Yeah. And so I said to the man behind the counter, are they for sale? Because they were in this locked cabinet. So he undid the cabinet and handed over the precious things. And I didn't get the opportunity to listen to them until we'd finished our holiday, came back and was just blown away, loved them. And then from that point onwards, started obsessively buying and just marveling at, here was this world that I'd known nothing about. This was absolutely brilliant. And so that was it. And from then, I suppose I became a bit more aware of fandom. But yeah, that was kind of my introduction to Big Finish. Yeah.
So your big career was radio, but you decided you wanted to play around with sound design. You finally tracked down Nick, and he hands you his precious baby at The Prisoner as the first thing. Was that a hard thing in terms of taking over? And I can see you're listed as with sound design with Jamie Robinson. Were you sort of working with him side by side or doing different episodes? How did that work?
Well, the Prisoner thing came about. It's very, very odd because The Prisoner had been sort of a love of my life as well. I'd always carried around with me in my radio career the Prisoner soundtrack, and I'd use various tracks on it as music beds for doing stuff on the radio with. And so when Nick sort of said, "Would you like to do The Prisoner?" I was like, "Oh yeah." So I think I ended up doing. I think Jamie was slated to do 2, and I was slated to do 2. Jamie, I think for whatever reason, because he was doing Doc 2 as well, and he was a very well-established sound designer. So in the end, I think I ended up doing the first 3. Jamie had sort of said to me, it makes more sense. He thought it made more sense that if I did the sound design and he did the music, which subsequently happened. But at that point, I did 3, he did 1. And in terms of recreating the sound of the village, I guess, yeah, that was a bit of a challenge, especially things like Rover. Rover was a very iconic sound, like the roar alone of Rover. That was done by a bloke in a lecture theatre, I think, in the 1960s. And I don't think the lecture theatre or the bloke exists anymore. So doing reverse engineering Rover, because on the base of Rover is very interesting because they did that using a rubber inner tube with buckshot in it to get that sort of initial sound. Well, I've got no access to buckshot or a bicycle inner tube, so it was a question of trying to come up with something which sounded similar. Then if you listen closely to Rover, on some bits of Rover but not others, there's a respirator. There's also backwards singing monks. So it's going back in and reverse engineering what they did to make these sounds. I did try and get some original, like for the Lotus. I tried to find the original sound effects, but I couldn't. So I ended up going out to Goodwood, pestering some people that I knew who had a Lotus, and then traveling around with them, trying not to fall off as I was perched very precariously trying to record the sound of the Lotus. But that was done at Goodwood. And in other times I would just say, look, there's the recorder. And, this guy would tear off round the circuit, and then we'd see what we got coming back. So, I tried to get some effects that would be, because I hated the idea of people thinking that's not a Lotus. But now, of course, I know that, they would just chuck in whatever stock effect they had, and people would just, take it as. So, yeah, it was fun. I loved The Prisoner. I loved every single minute of doing that. And when Nick said it was coming to end, I mean, I was fairly devastated because I loved it, and it's meant so much to me over the years. And on my 50th, we went to Port Merion, so I could actually, because in my mind, I think my village was perhaps a little different in layout to the original, but yeah, it was great going there and seeing the green dome.
I've been to Port Merion when I was over there with my in-laws travelling around England. It took them a while to work out I was taking them all to Doctor Who locations. As we're weaving our way through Wales, and they thought Port Merion was a lovely place. And then they worked out, hang on, Doctor Who was filmed here? I said, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, Mask of Mandragora, yeah.
It was the tour of Doctor Who sites that, yes.
I think that's perfectly acceptable.
Oh, yeah, it did. And they saw beautiful things. They saw where the Abominable Snowman was filmed, and they, all the way through Wales, and they saw lovely sights.
Yeah, that's good, yeah.
I hope he doesn't break any speed limits and get himself into trouble. He's going to get himself killed one day, you know.
Where am I?
In the village.
In the village.
Désirez-vous un taxi, monsieur?
Take me away from here.
Where to?
As far as you can go.
I heard this was your first day.
And my last.
Why'd you say that, number 6?
Don't call me that. It's just the number of a house I woke up in.
Now then, number 6. File open.
I don't know who you are. I don't know who you work for. And I don't care. Open that door or I'll break it down.
There's no need for all this nonsense. All we want to know is why you resigned.
Stop! Do not run! Halt!
Stop running, man! Stop running! You don't stand a chance!
We don't want any unhappiness in our beautiful village, and if number 6 behaved aggressively towards you...
What's your real name?
What's yours? You see, we're both scared to talk.
I love you.
This place is a madhouse. A bloody nightmare.
Yes, get out of here. Yes, we must, or they'll kill us. Worse.
Worse?
Orange alert. Orange alert.
So you were back pretty soon after that for the 7th Doctor adventure Nightshade, so it hit the main range running. What's your process for actually putting together a Doctor Who story? What do you get? What do you have to do?
If you're going to do it properly, you have to start with the dialogue. You always start with the dialogue, and some directors want a complete dialogue edit, and others are not so fussed about that because you can fix the dialogue post. You can go back in and if somebody wants an alt take, you can grab an alternative take and put that in. I think one of the things I love about Nick, and then I said to him, do you want a dialogue edit? And he went, no, just get on with it. Because if you are doing a dialogue edit, then of course you've done it once and then you've got to go through it again with the sound effects. So personally, what I do is I'll go through the script scene by scene. I will then go through the dialogue, but I will only do it scene by scene, and then I'll put the effects in, and then I'll move on. And once a scene is finished, I'll port it into a master episode file so that I can start tweaking how it all runs and fits together. But I'm somebody who do dialogue edits and concentrate on the dialogue, but I won't do a complete dialogue edit up front unless I really need to. And there were a couple of Tom Bakers where I've had to do that for one reason or another, because they were recorded remotely and we needed to make sure that everything was fit and ready to go. Because of course you've only got a small window if you need to do a remount with a particular cast member. Because when you're not in studio, some people are better at sort of finding environments where they can record and there's not so much reverberance there, because if you have to start fixing dialogue, sometimes artifacts can come in and it can start affecting the sound of the audio. But most of the time, if it's studio based, I'll go through scene by scene and do the dialogue edit first, then put the dialogue, then put the effects in, and then port it into a main episode. So that's the way that I approach it.
So how long does it take to, I guess scenes depend on how many pages it is. How long are you looking for in terms of putting together a 4-episode script?
A 4-episode script. I mean, I tend to, I didn't do any 4-episode scripts, but I've tended to just do the 1 hour episodes. And it depends on how quickly you're working. If I'm really going for it, I could probably do it in a week, like a 1 hour episode. But because I do it it's sort of 3 days on, 3 days off, because I'm doing the radio alongside that. So I would say maybe 2.5 weeks to put an episode together. It also depends on the kind of effects that are needed, because sometimes you can spend a day trying to get something, there's various monsters or background effects that you might need, or you want to sort of mess around and see if you can come up with some new environment. And sometimes that can be really easy. Sometimes it comes together beautifully. Other times it can be really frustrating, because you come out of the studio, you've done 8 hours and you've got nothing, nothing that you can really use. So there's a lot of factors that depend on it. But if it's going really, really well, I think like Space 1999, for example, Breakaway, I think I had about 2 weeks to get all that done. So it was an episode a week.
So you do scene by scene. Is that because? So do you do all the scenes in the same location together, so that you've got the same underlying sounds for rooms and things, or you just chronologically work through them? No, you do.
I do chronologically. Most of the time, I do chronologically work through them. But once you've set up one particular session, so for example, if I know that a whole bunch of scenes are going to be in a particular location, I'll just set up a session for that particular location, and so all the scenes that happen there will be done in that session. And I like to do it chronologically, because when I'm porting them into the master episode file, I have been known, if I've done it out of order, to forget to make a scene. And on a couple of occasions I've gone through and thought, this is not making any sense, and it's because I've forgotten to make the scene, because I've not done it in a linear way. That's not to say that it always happens like that. There might be some days where I think, oh, well, I'm here, I don't want to close down the session, I'll just get on with making the next scene. But then I have to consciously remind myself that I need to take that over at a later date and put it into the master episode file. Because sometimes you can not see the wood for the trees, if you see what I mean, because you're just so busy, and you think you've done something, but you haven't. There we are.
So is there basically 3 layers you're looking at? You're looking at it as a dialogue edit as one layer. Mm-hmm. You're looking at an ambience room environment layer, and then you're looking at the specific sound effects, the walking, the guns, the monsters. Is that how you'd split it up, or not quite?
Sort of. I mean, you'll have your dialogue edit, and then I'll put in the spot effects, the Foley effects, and then I'll go for the environment most of the time. But there are some times, if I want to get a feel for it, I'll put the dialogue in place, and then I might slip the environment in so that I can start to feel it working. And then I might put in the reverb effects, for example, if they're in a cave or if they're in a room, I'll put those on. And that's already giving me a sense of, I like to make things sound as real as I can. And sometimes when I haven't got those effects on, sometimes it doesn't perhaps sound as real as I would like it. So put those on, it makes a world of difference. It's not always the case. I think each scene, sometimes just, this is going to sound a bit strange perhaps, but sometimes scenes just come together. You can feel them coming together and you just think, yeah, this is working. And there are other scenes where it's a bit more of a challenge. And so maybe you start putting some of the room effects on just to give you a bit of a nudge in the right direction. So I think it sort of depends on the scene, depends on the episodes. I love Base Under Siege episodes. Oh, those are my favorites. And I know that some people might think, oh, it's been done a million times, but I love a creepy monster hunting the Doctor and protagonist, and the Doctor having to think about those things. And if it's a really claustrophobic area, then sometimes just to help get that feeling and make it a bit more visceral, I will put the reverb effects on fairly early on in the process, and then think, yep, because now I'm working with reality.
Does it help being a fan of these shows to do the sound effects? Like The Prisoner, Space 1999, and Doctor Who all have very unique sounds within them. Could a sound designer just go in blind and maybe watch a TV episode and then go for it, or do you pay much more attention as a fan to actually getting the nuances right?
I think, well, a good sound designer can go in and watch a show and get a feel for it. But I think if you grew up with it and if you are a fan of it, then I think that helps immensely, because you're already familiar with that world. And because you are a fan, you want to get it right for other fans. I mean, I'm a huge Anderson fan. And so Space 1999, for example, I loved the Eagles. Who doesn't love an eagle? And so wanting to get that right, and having all the episodes anyway was great, because it meant that I could. And how that came about was quite funny, because we were going to a firework display and a Christmas grotto land, that my wife wanted to go and see, and it was in Bewley in Hampshire. And out the window, I spied Nick Briggs, and I thought, is that Nick? And so I just ran out, left my wife, she was bemused and going, what's going on? So anyway, I went over, there was Nick, and we just got talking about Space 1999. And I said to him, don't watch series 2, that's a rubbish series. Watch series 1, that's the one you want to watch. And I said, there is a great episode there where Bernard Cribbins plays a washing machine with malevolent intent. And Nick was sort of like, I mean, of course, I should have known that Nick absolutely knew Space 1999. Left, right, centre, backwards. So when he eventually came back to me and said, would you like to do it? I was like, yeah, because then I could go in and, you're messing around. You've got the chance to do stuff that you grew up with. I grew up watching Space 1999. So, for example, with Moonbase Alpha and the Eagles and reverse engineering how they did it, I wanted to make that as close as I could get it to for the fans, as much as for myself as for other fans. The stun guns, how they did the Eagles, it's quite typical Anderson, of course, how they did it using the everyday effects that they had. But when you figure out how they've done it and you put something together and it sounds like an eagle, that's brilliant. Not to say that any sound designer couldn't go in and do that, but I think it helps when you're a fan, because you're in that world already,
So how do they do it? Can you tell?
Okay, it's as far as I could work out, it's your jet airliner sounds and your jet engines as they power off, and then when the retro rockets come in, it's one of the explosions that they used to use all the time, but actually coupled with the engine sound and the visuals, there it is. It's a retro rocket firing or a thruster lifting the eagle off. And if you listen to the Anderson stuff, there's a lot of 747s and things like that in there, and it's a beautiful sound, and then when you see it, beautiful.
You said you only had 2 weeks to do Breakaway. Why such a short time?
I think because they just got it together in the studio, and they I don't know the ins and outs as to why it was so tight, but I know that they just got everybody together. I guess it may be a bit in a casting thing that they knew who they wanted, and the availability is sometimes a problem. But I remember David saying to me, we need this by the end of July, can you do it? And so fortunately I was in a pretty flexible radio job where I said, can I take a week off? And they were like, yeah, sure. So I was like, yeah, just focused in and did it by the end of the month. Yeah. So was it? Yeah. Yeah.
Now, you don't compose the music, but do you lay the music on, or do you just pass? Well, once you've got your sound design, everything together, what do you do with it then?
Once you've got your FX edit, you send it off to the director. You'll get notes back, depending on how bad a job you've done, will depend on how many notes you get. So then you focus on fixing the stuff that the director would like fixed. Sometimes it's a big job, sometimes it's not such a big job, because sometimes I suppose you're going by the stage directions that are in the script, and perhaps the director has a different idea of how they want the scene to go. But once you fix that then goes off to the musician for the Ninth Doctor. In this case, it'll be Howard, and then Howard will work his magic, and then Howard masters it as well, and that's when it goes off to be pressed onto CD and put into the vault so that it can be released on to the website as a download.
What is mastering?
Okay, mastering is where you are bringing everything up to a particular level, and you're bringing everything up to a particular loudness. I think we're also looking at how loud things should be, because there's various ways that mastering can be done, but I think we're looking now maybe at perhaps I'm speaking about something which many people don't know about, but I think when you put a CD in, you kind of want it to be uniform and all at the same the same volume, if you like. And mastering over the years has got into the loudness wars. So if you're listening to say a record from the 1980s, as opposed to a record now, you'll really tell the difference in how they've mastered it, because there wasn't, when you put in, I don't know if I'm making sense, but it's all to do with compression. It's to do with boosting the sound without destroying the sound, because you want it to have a certain loudness and a certain thrust to it, a certain attack. So that's what it's all about. It's kind of setting those levels, really. So, and you're trying not to destroy the nuances that you've built in to the sound design, but at the same time making it so that when somebody puts the CD into a player or they're listening to it on their headphones, they shouldn't have to be turning up and down the volume. It should just be one consistent level. So that's essentially what mastering is, if that makes sense. That makes sense? Well, I know what I mean. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you can tell some mastering is absolutely superb, and you know, some of it just destroys everything. I would say in terms of music, one of the best producers out there at the moment, the people behind Taylor Swift's output, you can hear everything, whereas some other stuff is just squashed to bits. You know, that's not really what you need.
Okay, so when you do something like At a Girl, say in the 1940s, compared to Space 1999, which is still sort of 70s feel, compared to the Lucy Miller stuff, which is current, is there differences you do in the mastering or in terms of the quality of the sound to give you those feelings? Is there a 70s feel versus a 40s feel?
No, I don't think there is. I mean, I didn't master those because the musicians usually, when the guys who are putting the music on, they tend to master those. But I don't think there is. I mean, I think that you always want to be sympathetic when you're mastering. I did master Nightshade, and when I did that, it was kind of light touch mastering. I didn't put oodles of compression in because I didn't want to squash everything, because it's quite an emotional story, and it's quite a big moment for the Doctor, because you think he's going to be retiring and throwing it all in. And sometimes if you put a lot of compression and attack on there, sometimes you can over compress, and then it removes you from the emotion of a story somehow. So I was fairly light touch on that, but you know, still bringing it up to a certain level of loudness. And again, there are now standards that you can get. I think Netflix, the BBC, some of the other big streamers, they have particular standards that they want. So you've got loudness meters, so you can tell if you're hitting that. And that again is to make sure that you're not absolutely destroying the sound that you're sending. So other things, like if you're mixing in 5.1, a lot of stuff is mixed in 5.1 for Blu-ray release. Of course, when you're then squashing that down to a 2.0 mix, of course, something's got to give, and quite often it's the dialogue. And again, bad mastering can really destroy dialogue and really remove you from it. So I think that's something I do tend to watch out for, because after all, the dialogue is what is driving the story. So I think rather than there being a period feel, I think it's how sympathetic you can be without deviating too much from the need to produce a consistent sound all the way through.
Listen to me. There are things in here with us that are not of this planet. They're here for me!
Coming soon from Big Finish Productions, Doctor Who, Nightshade.
We're missing something. What is it? I see the creature from my old series. Poor Lawrence believed that the ghost of his late brother appeared to him. Your security guard and Jack Prado, what did they see?
What's that? I've never seen that.
Bob? Is that you?
Ace, what the hell is that?
I don't know, but we need to move now!
Hurry, Miss Mason!
We are being bombarded by data from space. Maybe it's...
Invaders from Mars? That's your province, not mine. At least in the real world.
Look at all that energy pouring from it. What do you need? Yes, we've established that. What is it that you need?
Oh, something's breaking through the wall.
Son, I think we better get out of here, sharp.
Oh, dear God! You see, it's them! Into the corridor! Run! Now!
Looks like there's a storm coming.
Big Finish. We love stories.
Now, the big series you've been handed recently to look after is the Ninth Doctor, the new Chris Eccleston series. How did you get the joy of getting the new Doctor?
Yeah, that was a mysterious one, because David emailed me out of the blue one day and said, "Can't tell you much about what we're thinking about, but would you be prepared to perhaps go on to just one elongated series? How would you feel about that, rather than different productions?" And I said, "Yeah, no, that's fine." I said, "That sounds good. Yeah, what have you got?" Not for one moment thinking that it would be the Ninth Doctor. So David went, "Right, okay, leave it with me," and that was it. I didn't hear anything else for a while. And then I'd come out of a game of paintballing with a friend of mine, so hot and sweaty on a Sunday afternoon. Checked my phone when we got back to the car, and it had blown up on Twitter with all these millions of tweets about Christopher Eccleston coming back. And I was like, wow, Christopher Eccleston. And then, of course, checked my emails, and there it was from David saying, "Yep, this is what we'd like you to do." And it was genuinely a moment where I think my heart stopped, because I was like, oh, there may have been an expletive, because my mate was like, what's up? I went, I can't really tell you too much about it, but as it's on Twitter, I can tell you that this bloke is returning to Doctor Who, and that I'm going to be sound designing it. So that's how it came about.
So why have you just been working on that one series? Is this how much capacity you have, or they're after unity of sound, or?
Do you know, I'd not done much Doctor Who, and maybe they thought that actually it would be nice if I did do some Doctor Who. I don't really know. I mean, it could be consistency of sound. I mean, the box set that we just finished, I got COVID, which meant that I was falling massively behind with the episodes. I'd done one, and so they had to draft in a couple of other sound designers to help with that. So there on one of the box sets you might see a difference in sound, but I think it sort of does help if you've got one person handling all the sound design for a particular series, because there is a consistency, and also you've got lots of the effects that you create, you can just then plow on with them rather than having to send them to other sound designers. There are various sessions that I've got that I'll go back to time and time again, like the TARDIS. Once I've set that up, every single scene that takes place in the TARDIS will take place there because I've got a consistency of sound, a consistency of effects. So maybe it was to do with that, but for whatever reason, I'm really, really pleased that they did it. I owe David Richardson so much because it's a dream, isn't it? I mean, Christopher Eccleston comes back and wow, what a job.
It was a relatively short time that he had in the television series. Is there a sound specific to that year of Eccleston on television that you can put your finger on, that you can say you must have that sort of stereotypical Ninth Doctor sound within the story?
That's a good question. I don't know whether there is. I mean, certainly the TARDIS had a very different sound when it came back. But because there was that commonality of that particular set and those particular sounds between the 9th and the 10th, I think there's a lot of commonality there. But I don't think there's obviously there's the leather jacket, which you want to kind of get in from time to time. And I did spend a lot of time. One day, I have a sort of, it's a kind of U-boat thing, isn't it? And I did go out and buy one of those so that I could just be wearing it and then, mess around, pretending to press buttons and holding the sonic and, doing all of that. So I think, there's little idiosyncratic sounds like that. But in terms of, the big stuff, I don't think so really. And I think, Nick, when he wrote Ravagers, he had some particular sounds that he wanted for particular things. Like there was, I think the Doctor calls it a tiny little gizmo that he's got, which detects time anomalies and tears, wormholes and things like that. That, as I was reading the script, I thought, well, that's just kind of a nonsense sound, isn't it? So I just went out and made a little bit of nonsense that thinking that the Doctor would have put this together, and there it was. So little idiosyncratic sounds that sometimes crop up in other adventures, but they're kind of in the background, if you see what I mean. I've included those. But in terms of like big stuff, I don't really think there is. I mean, obviously there's the troubled history there, and I think that's, everybody knows that. But I think because Big Finish treat people properly, and because it's the chance to him to do it's kind of unfinished business, isn't it? And he's getting the chance to do it the way that he wanted to do it. And I think that he's enjoying. You can actually hear he's enjoying it.
Yeah, you can really hear that. The last box set released, you can really tell he's having a ball.
Like I said, I just heard Sanctuary 9, and that was just incredible. It was like if that was on TV, I would have just been in heaven. It was like he was there still on television. Yeah. It was great.
Because the next two are just as good, but feel totally different. So the one in the casino is brilliant, and actually that's great sound in that. All the background stuff you've done for that one, and then the ice one is really terrifying. So the three of them are just totally different.
Yeah,
but that's so clever.
That's a good example of base Under Siege. The one with Break the Ice, which
even crawling through the air ducts.
Yeah. I don't want to give too much away because you've not listened to it yet, have you? So
Philip has. I
have.
Yeah. So but that was a really good example of how I actually started to put some of the reverb effects and the room effects on that I wanted, because I was thinking, this is working. I wanted it to sound as real as possible. There's another one I've just done, which is another sort of Base Under Siege, and that's the one I did before I got COVID, and working with Ken Bentley, who is such a gem. I mean, some really, really good directors that I get to work with, and I'm, when their names come up as directing, I'm like, yeah, because they really, they're on it. They really know what they want, and I probably put a bit too much reverb on, and Ken rightly pointed out. He said, "You need to take some of that off." He said, "Because I think we're it's a good example of what I was saying, where you're losing the emotion, you're becoming a bit more separated from the character. But that's why you need a director, you see, somebody to sort of come in and say, no, we need, just because you think as a sound designer, there's
it's
a
all
great
about me.
temptation. Well, it's overproducing, isn't it? And you're quite right, actually. If we do our jobs properly and nobody says anything about the sound design, that's great, because that's the highest honor. But if somebody then says, well, this was, but there again, it can work the other way. Like with Lucy Miller, The Further Adventures, there's one where it's the Dalek trap, where they're in the void, and somebody was really bitterly complaining that I just hadn't tried with the sound design. And I said, well, I don't know what you expected me to do, because it says they're in a void, and if I put a marching band in there or bird song or whatever, that wouldn't have been appropriate. So you kind of you go with the flow. But generally, if nobody's mentioning the sound design, then you think, yeah, I got away with it again, so that's good.
You could have had a very faint John Pertwee singing, I cross the void beyond the mind.
I could have, yeah. I mean, then it goes the other way. I think the Martian invasion of Earth, I mean, that had bloody everything at it. I mean, there was some, so I had to remix that. The first half, there's so much going on in that. And I was painfully aware that we're in a 2.0 mix, not a 5.1. Because if it was a 5.1, you could probably have done more. But with a 2.0, you then have to start gradually panning effects out and around so that you can still get everything in, because there was literally so much going on there. Like there's one moment where two of the central characters are running and there's everybody fleeing for their lives because the Martian machines just come out of the pit and they're firing everywhere. And when I first put it together, I thought, this is just it's a mess. It's just noise. Nobody's going to get anything. So I had to go back and remix it and decide what I was going to put in the center, and then just gradually move various effects out. So you're panning it left and right so that you've got everything in there. So sometimes it can be a real delicate balancing act, because there are some effects I'm really, really pleased with that you come up with, and then of course in the final mix you can't bloody hear them because there's all this other stuff going on.
One thing that always strikes me when I put on a Ninth Doctor set is that Christopher Eccleston's performance is just so spectacular. It hardly needs anything, does it? So is there anything you do to enhance the vocals? Are there spaces that you...
But when I first started out sound designing, I didn't really put a lot of EQ onto and enhancing vocal effects onto the actual vocal tracks. But now I do, because I want to really lift them. And I suppose that's a degree of development, because as the first few productions that I did, I suppose the best way of describing it is perhaps it was a little bit too Radio 4. But then when I started working for Big Finish, it was like, we need a bit more oomph. And I completely understand and get that. And you do with Doctor Who, I think, need a bit more oomph. So if you've got oomphy sound effects, big stuff which is happening, you need sort of a bit more enhancement of the vocals. But that's all it is really, because the performances are all there. Sometimes I might be asked by a director to cut down some of the beats between what they're saying, but most of the time you just leave the performance as is, because that's the way that they were doing it at the time. That's the way that the director wants it. So unless of course they don't, and then that's where editing comes in.
Yeah, and I guess there's times when you have to leave the space around that. I guess the best special effect on that story would be baby Sontarans getting plucked. That was pretty cool.
Spoilers.
Yeah. That whole adventure, when I got that and I was reading that, I mean, some of the adventures are, without any of the effects, are very, very funny, and some of them are very spooky, and so your mind is constantly racing, and you sometimes look and you think, how am I going to do that? And there are always moments where you will think, how am I going to do that? There was also maybe this is a spoiler, I don't know, but there's a big battle which is going on, and I just had fun one morning just making just a really, really big battle, and then my wife's coming in saying, what you doing? I was like, listen to this. And of course she won't appreciate that this huge space battle is going on, that you can throw explosions in, and there's ships crashing and flying overhead, and it's, you know, some Tyrants firing their weapons. And I made a deliberate choice to take the original Sontaran weapons from the classic series and kind of mix them in with something a bit more modern, because I just felt that, you know, that was right, and a sort of little Easter egg there as well, so that people can go, oh, I recognize that, you know. But, you know, something like that's a joy to do. But there were, I think it was a Torchwood one where they said that there was a Medibot, or what was it? It was a medical spider, and there was a very clever name for it. And I thought, oh, how am I going to do that? How do you do a metal spider scuffling? And I figured out. So baking tray. So Kelly, I need your nails. And so she's running her nails over this baking tray, and then using that and adding a few more metal effects in, and suddenly you've got a medical spider. So yeah.
We have something in common, Ian. My wife is Kelly as well, and she doesn't appreciate anything to do with this podcast or Doctor Who either.
It's always the way, isn't it? Yeah.
Now, all the Ninth Doctor stories have also been released on vinyl. Did you have anything special in relation to that, or you just plonk it on?
I didn't actually. That's Howard's department, and I think what Howard has had to do is he's had to master it in a slightly different way for vinyl, because there are different ways to master for different mediums. Vinyl is, everybody will tell you. I bought some vinyl the other day actually there's a record shop just up the road, weirdly, that sells really quite good vinyl. So I went in there, and I think there is a different way of mastering for vinyl. You'd probably have to ask Howard, but it's a sort of warmer sound. So I think it's probably going back and perhaps a case of less is more. I could be completely wrong on that, because I've never mastered for vinyl. But there is, I think, with online stuff, with CD stuff, with vinyl stuff, I think everybody is beginning to come back to a sort of one particular standard. But that's a question for Howard. I know that when I send over the edits to him, he then has to make them fit, because a record, I think, is 25, 30 minutes maybe at the most. So with those episodes, generally anyway, you have to be quite disciplined. So some episodes, if they're being released as a download or on CD, you can run maybe 5 minutes over an hour, because obviously you've got special features sometimes to put on to the CD as well. I think it's 80 minutes for a CD, so it can make things tight. But for record, even tighter. So you've got to be fairly disciplined, and then he'll just take those, and I know he's got to then find the appropriate place where he can make an edit so that you can have 30 minutes on each side. I did get sent vinyl copies. I mean, amazing. I really didn't expect that. I've not opened them. I'm afraid to open them, because they're such gorgeous things. So
there's nothing quite as beautiful as a 12-inch sleeve with artwork on it. It's just something special about it.
Beautiful.
I would love it, but there's no possible way they could get to Australia without costing so much money.
5 times as much in postage.
The postage would be horrendous, plus the vinyl just doesn't. No.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing as well. I've got a friend who has a special room that he's built. I mean, this is more money than sense perhaps, but he got acoustic engineers in to actually soundproof it. So when you go in there, I've said to him, God, let's make a great studio. And he's told me where to go politely, because he sits in there, he's got his speakers and he's got a record player. And his wife said to us, ask him how much he spent on the stylus. And I looked at him and I said, how much did you spend on the stylus? And he went, $2,000. I mean, I was floored. He says that it absolutely makes a difference, and I'm willing to believe that. But that's the thing with vinyl, isn't it? You've got to have something, I think, very good to play it on, because it's a more fragile medium. It's such a precious thing as well. And I'm sure there are some people out there who will absolutely get where he was going in spending $2,000 on the stylus. I don't know. I think that's a bit insane, because I could do a lot with $2,000. But CD, downloads. I'm cool with that. So,
I've got a couple of crate loads of vinyl, which I just can't get rid of. So under the stairs, I've got my vinyl collection from when I was a kid, and I occasionally put it out and play something. I've got my Genesis Daleks, but not in the safe, just in my crate.
Oh, you see, I'm afraid, I've not played that record. I got it back in, it would be 84 when I finally tracked it down. Had to pay for it with postal orders, which was, something that you could do back then. I played it once so I could record it, and I've never played it since. Even then, I was sort of petrified that I might scratch it or something. So
I think I almost wore mine flat.
Yeah, well, I mean, I just put mine onto a tape, and even then, I wouldn't listen to the tape very often because, of course, you don't want it stretching or breaking. So, I mean, thank goodness for downloads, because it's instant gratification and to a degree disposable and replaceable. But then, of course, you've got it on Blu-ray, so you can watch it as well as listen.
We didn't talk about UFO. I noticed. That was really cool. I just listened to that in the last couple of weeks. UFO, I just adored that. That would have been fun to do, getting all those very unique sounds in there.
Yeah, that's actually that maybe is an example of where there is a different sensibility to that one and a different feel. A lot of the effects, I don't think I couldn't recreate those because we just had no idea how. I don't think anybody's got any idea how they did some of those effects, but ITV just sent a lot of stuff over and said these are the source effects, which evidently came from Anderson as well. So we've got a lot of stuff from the Anderson stable. And I think when you're using the original effects, that does kind of rub off on some of the others. Things like the shadows, though, I had to recreate those. I mean, essentially I say recreate, but I just did what Anderson did, and that's just use a tank, slightly pitch it and vary it down. But that's exactly, what they would have done in the day. Some of the weapon sounds. Did you
redo the UFOs, or did you use the original sound?
No, we used the originals because I think Nick was very keen that we use the original sound. And I think there are some things that Nick's quite wedded to, and other things where he's quite open about you remaking them. Like The Prisoner, for example, I remade the Green Dome hum, that little low-level power thing, and the doors, and some of the other bits and pieces from the village. We just remade those, brought them up to date, and sort of approximated them. It's like with Alistair Locke and Martin Montague when they were working on Blake 7, they recreated the stuff and they got as close as they could, but there is a subtle difference there. But there are some effects where, Nick will say, no, I absolutely want the original for that. So, yeah, the UFOs, they are the genuine article, as it were. Yeah.
Well, Ian, thank you so much for what you bring to Big Finish and to our ears, and I'm looking forward to continue to enjoy it for many years to come.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I hope I made sense. And listen, I just got to say thank you, Big Finish, because, without them, I wouldn't be doing a job I absolutely adore. Thank you.
From Big Finish Productions, UFO, Destruct Positive.
Well, there's definitely something out there. I can see a flashing light reflected in the cockpit.
Damn it! Can you see it? Driver, off-road! I think I saw a light. A flashing light.
Ed, I'm under orders. Forget everything. That's what they told me.
We can make him doubt everything.
Lieutenant Colonel Virginia Lake.
You just don't give up, do you? Normally, I like that in a man.
Cold. That's just the drug entering your bloodstream.
Please, help me.
Just once, I wish we could catch a break. Just get one of them alive. I want to hear what they have to say. Hell, I just want to hear them scream after everything they've done to us.
I'll see what I can do, sir. You'll never see me again, but you'll sure as hell hear from me.
Are you familiar with Project Sign? Project Grudge?
I may not know everything about you, but I know enough to make your life very difficult.
Project Blue Book?
I can lift up the stone that you hide beneath and expose you to the sun.
These phenomena aren't unidentified anymore.
Others are just not human.
Ed, you're scaring me.
And I'm scaring myself.
Truth is, this fight is my life, Stringer, and it will become yours.
Get into the tree, goddammit! Get under cover!
I can see something. Over here.
There it is. Ever seen one before?
Not in the flesh.
You've got a UFO breathing right down your neck. Get out of there, sir!
Shadow is all that matters now.
Get down!
Welcome aboard Skydiver, Commander.
Captain Carlin, tell me how you lost him.
But you already know if you've read
I want to hear it from you, Captain.
Patching shadow control through now.
Shadow control to Skydiver 1. Do you read me? Over.
Adopt launch posture. You're going to want to hold into something, sir.
Sky 1, ready for launch.
Petra, eject! Get out!
Belay that order.
Petra Carlin is one of the best
You're
captains
taking this all very personally.
Captain Carlin,
Commander Straker.
what's your situation?
If anyone moves in my direction, I will shoot.
Don't be a damn fool.
Oh, Christ, what's that? What the hell is it?
Torpedoes armed and ready, sir.
Fire one.
So, you really think they're what? Body snatchers?
I don't know anything. I was just presenting a possibility, Alec.
So, this is what we do now.
To fight. To survive. To win this war.
Big Finish, for the love of stories.
Well, thanks, Philip, for organising that with Ian, and thank you, Ian, for chatting with us. It was great to talk to you.
It's fabulous, it was.
Thanks, Philip. All right, that only leaves us to talk about our recommendations for this week.
Can I go first?
And no, let me see whose turn it is. Where's my list? Do I have some? No, I don't even have notes, but I do think it is your turn.
Yeah, I thought it was. I am going to recommend what we were talking about with Ian, which is his last release that's come out. Maybe there's been something since then, but I think this is still his last release. The Ninth Doctor, Christopher Eccleston, Into the Stars.
Get it out, Philip. Get it out.
Get out. Into the Stars, starring Christopher Eccleston. These are 3 fabulous stories. You should listen to them, Dwayne. You'll enjoy them. So the first one, Salvation...
I've heard the first one. Salvation 9 is awesome.
Salvation 9 is amazing. It is so funny. I laughed and laughed all the way through it, even though it has some good points to make along the way too. But it's just outright comedy. You've got Last Zeta Scene. Sorry, the first one's by Timothy X Attack, and he's just done an amazing job.
Now, there's one author, every time I see Timothy's name, I go, my ears prick up because I know there's something good coming.
Indeed. James Kettle, who we've had on the program, and I think he's one of the greatest writers Big Finish has found recently, and he just writes some great stuff. He's done a great heisty sort of thriller thingy. Maureen O'Brien is in it, and I adore Maureen O'Brien. We had her on recently, playing a role that's nothing like Vicky at all. And you may not even, if you're not listening out for her, you won't hear her there. But she's just spectacular. She told us she'd done it on this program when she wasn't allowed to. But yeah, so it's good to finally hear what she'd done. And Break the Ice by Tim Foley, another guy we've had on the program so far, which is a real scary thriller. And some really, really scary stuff in that. Another amazing cast again. So 3 stories, all very different, amazing casts, wonderfully directed, great authors. Yeah, I can't recommend it more highly. It is just I think it's probably the best set to come out now since. I think this get better and better, and you can just hear Christopher Eccleston having a ball, and he's just the Ninth Doctor, and I am loving more Ninth Doctor stories. Dwayne, what do you want to recommend?
I want to recommend a box set that Iain Meadows worked on as well. And another recent release was UFO. Have you had a chance to hear UFO?
It is wonderful. Not what I expected at all, but it's just great.
What I love about this is it's taken all those core elements of the TV series, sort of modernised it a little bit, and it's given a backstory, because the TV series sort of starts and you're in the Shadow Organisation. They're trying to chase the aliens or find the aliens or whatever. But this gives the whole backstory behind Straker and his rise in the ranks to lead the Shadow Organisation. Wasn't even called Shadow to start with in this, was it? So Barnaby Kay plays Straker, and I think he does a great job.
I think Barnaby Kay is amazing.
He's got sort of that touch. It's not a full-on American accent, but neither was Ed Bishop's.
No,
in the series either. And I think, but it's not an impersonation of Ed Bishop.
It's not Barnaby Kay. I mean, you would not know. Having talked to Barnaby at length,
that's right.
He doesn't sound anything like that character, and his emotion or sort of emotionlessness. It's such an amazingly powerful performance, and the way he grows the three shows. I just say I think it was a Facebook post. Someone had a whinge recently about you should only have Americans play American characters, which the whole point of acting is that you're acting other parts, and the whole need that you can only have a nationality of the nationality, that you can't use accents. And I'd sort of made the snide comment about the fact that I'm fed up with Daleks being played by non-Daleks, because you just can't have. It's Doctor Who. It's fantasy. You have actors play roles, and when you've got someone as good as Barnaby Kay, let him go for it. And amazing. So that's my rant. What were you recommending, Dwayne? I butted in. Sorry.
I totally agree with you. Anyway, Barnaby was great in the lead role. Jeannie Spark playing Virginia Lake, she's awesome too. Samuel Clements is great as Alec Freeman. So they're the three primary cast members here, and it just really builds up.
So can I also say Nicholas Briggs too? I mean, once again...
Oh, yes, playing a different role.
A very, very different role. And a hilarious accent.
Yes,
I mean, once again, I mean, I assume it's something Eastern European. I mean, I don't think it's, once again, not supposed to be defined. But he played the character so well. I loved it. Great performance.
Yep, absolutely. So check it out. UFO is available now. Hasn't been available for long. You can still probably grab it while it's at its pre-sale price. Yeah. All right, that's it for this instalment of the Sirens of Audio. Thank you, Philip, for your company.
Thank you, Dwayne, for yours. Wonderful as always.
Thank you all for listening. Don't forget to drop a comment, like, share, subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Write us a review on Apple Podcasts if you can. Please do. It would be lovely to hear from you. In any way, shape or form, please reach out to us. We'll catch you next time for another exciting instalment, Philip.
It will be. Bye, everyone.
This has been the Sirens of Audio episode 130, The Great Equalizer, with our guest Iain Meadows and your hosts Philip Edney and Dwayne Bunny. Original theme music composed by Joe Kramer. Our website is sirensofaudio.com. You can email us at sirensofaudio@gmail.com or contact us via any one of our socials. Thanks for listening, audiophiles. We'll hear you next time.